Enna is a researcher at the Central Department of Environmental Science at the Tribhuvan University in Nepal, and she's also affiliated with the Presidential Business School. And Shreesha is a Social and Behavior Change Communication Officer at FHI 360.
All right, let me just pull up my screen first, and then we can start. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, Anika, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Shreesha Nankhwa. I'm working for this project called USA Clean Air, which aims to improve the air quality in Kathmandu Valley, which is the capital of Nepal. And the title of our presentation is Democratizing Air Quality Data Through Low-Cost Sensors in Nepal. And when we talk about democratizing data, what we mean is generally data and research, and it is generally seen as like within the purview of the scientific community, experts and researchers. But what we have seen is when we bring the data to the people who can then use it to make decisions, whether it's people who are in the government or everyday people, that can create a lot of change. And that is what we have seen. So that is what this title says, and that's what the presentation is also going to be about. So first of all, is my slide moving?
Currently not. No, maybe click on it.
All right,
and then...
okay. So first of all, this is a picture of Kathmandu, Nepal, and it shows both the good and the bad side of Kathmandu. High up in the mountains, you can see the clear sky and the beautiful Himalayas. But if you look at the bottom part of the picture, you can see Kathmandu Valley as it is now. So you can see this layer of smog that's covering the valley. You can see all the pollutants coming out of these chimneys. So this is what Kathmandu is like right now, and that's what we're trying to fix. So Nepal is a small country that's located between India and China with a population of just 30 million people, but air pollution has a lot of impact in Nepal. So more than 42,000 deaths happen annually just because of air pollution. In Kathmandu itself, the PM 2.5 level is more than 10 times higher than the WHO guideline. The main sources of air pollution in Nepal, it's mostly, if you look at more rural areas, it's mostly household energy, so using biofuels to cook within the kitchens in the villages. But if you look at more urban areas, it's vehicles and industry and waste burning. And when we talk about the history of air quality monitoring in Kathmandu in Nepal, it started in the 90s. So when ENFO, a research-based organization, started high volume air samplers to study air pollution in Kathmandu, then it progressed in 2002. There was the government introduced 24-hour sampling of the air quality, which continued for around 6 to 8 years, but then it stopped and then started again in 2016. And then in 2016, we see the introduction of low-cost air quality sensors in Nepal. So this picture, the third picture, is from the citizen science campaign called Drishti, which was run by about 18 citizens who used air quality, low-cost air quality samplers to collect data, air quality data, and use that in the advocacy, which we will see in this next slide. And this is a very effective campaign when it comes to utilizing data by the people. So in the first picture, you can see the air quality data from the low-cost samplers were actually published in a national daily. So that shows how bad the air quality is in Nepal. Then in the other picture, you can see how people are protesting for their right to breathe clean air. This is also organized by Drishti campaign, who were also side by side running the using the low-cost air quality sensors to collect data. And in the third picture, the person with the little hat, you see that's the mayor of Lalitpur city. And Drishti campaign actually went out and advocated using the low-cost air quality sensors. They advocated this is how bad the air quality is, so we need to change things. Another campaign was by this group called Cycle City Network Nepal. So the two guys you see there fixing the sensors are Samip and Nivesh. So they put these sensors in, gave it to pedestrians, to cyclists. They put it in buses and tempos to go around Kathmandu and collect data on how bad the air quality is. And then afterwards, then we moved into a more academic sphere where Tribhuvan University also started using air quality, low-cost air quality samplers. So that's where Enna is going to take over. Enna, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Okay, basically you got into what is the status of Nepal, the status of air quality in context of Nepal as well as Kathmandu Valley. So we will be talking about the use of low-cost sensors in order to do this air quality monitoring used by Central Department of Environmental Science through one university under the part of the project building capacity to improve air quality in South Asia. So this is the project which is led by Duke University with the funding from US Department of States and from Nepal. Professor Dr. Regina Maske from Central Department of Environmental Science, TU, has led this project with the other partners as well. Can you move the slide? So basically, what we did under this project is we use the low-cost air quality sensors, basically the blue sky air quality monitor, which basically measures the real-time PM, can also be used up to the altitude of 3,000 meters and can is also designed to use in the ambient condition, even in the highly polluted areas where the PM concentration is high as 1,000 microgram per meter cube. Next slide. Can you just, yeah. So basically the main objective of this project is to identify, to assess the variation of PM 2.5 along the different areas from eastern to western side, as you can see in this map, along with the north-south trajectory. If my mouse is moving, then you can see assessment of PM 2.5 concentrations in the Kathmandu Valley, in the Pokhara Valley, even in this north to south project, and as well as in these Tarai regions, basically from eastern to western side. So this, so a total of 64 these blue sky air quality monitor has been installed all over the Nepal, realizing the fact that the PM concentration, in order to identify what is the PM concentrations within Kathmandu Valley, the capital of Nepal, Kathmandu with the capital of Nepal, as well as the other parts of the Nepal, and this basically indicates the installation date. Next, please. So basically, the what we found is the PM 2.5 concentration. What we normally think is we basically think that the highly dense area, populated area, or the cities area are mainly concentrated with high pollution episodes or high pollution, right? But what we observed was that the concentrations were higher in this part of the Nepal, the Tarai region, in comparison to this Kathmandu area. That also indicates towards the transboundary pollution as well from the neighboring countries. The next slide, in this next slide, what we can see is this box plot basically signifies the different PM variations, basically in different the 5 municipalities of Kathmandu Valley. This is the data set that we have took from November 2022 to March 2023, in which the pollution is observed to be highest during this time period. It's the winter season, and even in this time as well. And the interesting fact about this data is in order to connect the rural parts with the urban areas. When we categorize, before starting this, I want to tell you sort about these places. This is Kathmandu metropolitan city, the city area within Kathmandu Valley. This Lalitpur metropolitan city, Chandragiri area, Sankarapur, and Changunaran. These basically 4 areas are the areas which are considered as the major cities in terms of population density. But Sankarapur is one of the minor cities in comparison to this other 4 areas. But what we can observe is even in the rural suburban areas like Sankarapur, the PM concentrations is quite quite aligned with the other major cities as well. Realizing the fact that not only the city areas, even the greener places are affected with this type of pollution issues. Next slide. Yeah, with the communication with Akim and the team and the AirGradient team, we also co-located the 3 AirGradient outdoor sensors with the blue sky sensor. Before that, this blue sky sensor is factory calibrated, and we also calibrated it with the green EDM that is in EC mode. So we also calibrated, co-located 3 AirGradient sensors with this blue sky air quality monitor for approximately 8 days, and the R-square value for this is quite good, which ranges in between 0.92 to 0.93. Over to you, Shreesha.
All right. Thank you so much, Enna, for explaining about the different networks of sensors that the Tribhuvan University has put up. So I'm going to talk a little more about how these networks of sensors are being utilized. So in this picture, these are all pictures from what USA Cleaner has been doing in the past 1 year. So in the first 2 pictures in the left, you can see the blue sky sensors that were set up by CDS, Tribhuvan University. And in the first picture, you can see Enna's colleague, Ramesh, explaining to the mayor of Changunaran about the sensor and what kind of data it will generate for his municipality. And in the picture right below that, the guy in the blue, his name is Surendra Lamichhane, and he works at the municipality itself. And Enna's another colleague is explaining to him about how to extract the data from the sensors. In the second 2 pictures, you see the sensors from OpenSeneca that we utilized in a festival basically called Kura Kathmandu, which is the biggest cycling festival that happens in Nepal. More than 4,000 cyclists join in the festival. And we basically deployed 9 citizen scientists, equipping them with little portable sensors so while they go around the circuit of Kora Kathmandu, they also collect data. And later that data was actually then showed to them itself, like, this is the data that you collected. And we created a little map with different colors. So green, where the air quality was good, and green, yellow, you know how the air quality index works, AQI index works. So basically we use those same colors, and the people could then understand, oh, this is the kind of air I'm breathing. So if I'm in this area, I'm breathing clean air, but if I'm in a traffic junction or near an industry, they can see that they are getting more polluted air. So that was a really good way of sensitizing the people. And in the third picture, the boy, his name is Rojesh, and he's fixing a little wire in the air gradient, low cost air quality air gradient sensor that was actually installed in his home itself. So we had installed it in September, and it's still there. So for the past almost 3 months, the air sensor has been collecting a lot of data, and that has been very helpful in sensitizing the local people of Harigaon. So this sensor was placed in this a very old part of Kathmandu called Harigaon, which has a very historical importance as well. And what our project is doing is we are pedestrianizing a little section of Hadigaon every Saturday. And these sensors are placed along those stretch, and the data from those sensors is also being like communicated to the people. So just last Saturday, we had a little presentation in an open air presentation where the kids could all come in and they learned a lot about air pollution, but they were also shown the data from these sensors. This is what the data says. This is the kind of air that you're breathing. And that has been very helpful in sensitizing the people, making them aware that air pollution is a problem, and it's something that they should be working towards. So when we talk about citizen science and giving data to the people, so there are three major things we have realized are important. The first is the ownership of the sensor and the data by the local people. Second is they shouldn't just have the sensor in their home. They also need to be able to access the data. And finally, they should understand the data and what it implies. So what are the implications of if the air quality is if the AQI index is 150 versus if the AQI index is 50. So if we can sensitize people on that through the data that they have collected in their own homes, that can be a very powerful tool. So finally, when we talk about way forward, so the first thing I think we have realized we need to do is we need to expand the network of low-cost air quality sensors and use it for also regular air quality monitoring as well as citizen science related applications. Second, we need to ensure the ownership, access, and understanding of air quality data by the local stakeholders who are using that data. And finally, we need to encourage the utilization of air quality data by local government in their planning and implementation, and also by the local communities so that they can use it in their advocacy and awareness raising programs. Thank you. That is all from me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shreesha and Enna, for a wonderful talk and really cool project and good engagement. The picture in the beginning was quite impressive, actually. I can see some questions in the chat. I think Ikom Mamadov, sorry if I don't pronounce it right, from OpenAQ has had a few questions. Maybe you can just unmute yourself and ask them directly to Shreesha and Enna. Ikram? Okay, if not, I can just read them out for you. So the first question is, what experience do you have in fundraising in terms of what donors or organizations are supported in this? Then also, what kind of requirements do you have about low-cost sensors, like your experiences here? Any criteria about low-cost producing companies where you purchase the sensors? And then the question would also be, okay, maybe we can stop here because you won't be able to remember all of them anyway, and then we can go on.
Let me just answer the first question and try to answer the second question maybe, and Enna can take over. So when it comes to fundraising, so we're basically funded by USAID. So it's a USAID funded project. So funding is not an issue, but I know Enna and Tribhuvan University have also received funding from US Department of State, but I'm sure there are other donors as well. As to how far the requirement about low-cost sensor, I'm sure Enna will be able to give you a more technical overview, but from a more programmatic point of view, first of all, the cost is also a big issue when it comes to low-cost sensors, and also like ease of like how easy is it to use. So we're working with people who maybe are not very technical. So how can we make it easy for them to just look at the sensor? If you have, for example, just having a screen or not having a screen in a sensor can make a big difference. So if you have a sensor with a screen and that shows the data there, that can make a big difference. So how easy is it for people to read the data, for people who may not want to go to a dashboard or may not have the technical ability. If we're talking about a 60-year-old woman living in Kathmandu, she might not be able to like go into a computer and click through the dashboard. So having like access, so making it easy for people to access the data is also very important. Anything else? I'm sure Enna is going to cover.
Yes,
Yeah.
so there were also like yes, you covered all the questions so far, and then there's one like there are more questions from IPCROM which I think are a bit more wider picture. So what steps are you taking to cooperate with state agencies, I guess, to mitigate the air pollution? What are the challenges there? And also are you engaging with the health sector as well?
Okay, in addition to the what the Shreesha told about the technical specifications regarding the low-cost sensors, what we wanted is about more about the use. We also were looking after the data downloading part, whether it's the data is in the SD card or through the data can be downloaded through the internet facility. So those are the area of concern. The next one is about from this power backup point. What we use for the low cost sensors in this project typically is it's connected directly from the power supply. So if there is the power backup, battery backup as well, it will be far more easier, along with the accessibility, the good as well as easy accessibility with the dashboard. The next question.
Wi-Fi, Enna.
Yeah, already told, ma'am. It's about internet facility, yeah.
Let me take up the question on engaging health sector. So yes, our project is working with health sector because the goal of our project itself says that we are trying to improve air quality. So in order to improve the health outcomes of the people, because of course air quality has a big impact on health sector as well. So yes, we are engaging with health sector, and we hope to also utilize these low cost air quality sensors in engaging with the health sector as well, because we're working with community level health volunteers who go out into the community and engage with the people on an everyday basis. So if we can like connect all of these dots as well, then that can create a lot of waves as well. So yes.
Fantastic. We still have questions in the chat, but I'm afraid we need to give everyone equal amounts of time to speak. So we keep the questions for the buffer in the end, and we go on now with a talk from Dan Westervelt. I already said a few words. So he is the Lamont Associate Research Professor at the Lamont-Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University in New York. He's also an affiliate scientist with the NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies, and also an air pollution advisor to the US State Department. And he's already shared his slides. Wonderful. Yeah, okay, Dan, the stage is yours.
Okay, can you hear me and also see the full screen? The slides? Yep, okay.
Yes.
So yeah, just to follow up. So yeah, my name is Dan Westervelt. I'm a research professor at the Lamont-Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University. This is a work that is going on in my group that is led by a PhD student that's working with me, Garima Raheja. It would have been nice to have her present this, but she's currently working at the White House in the Council of Environmental Quality. And so this is actually kind of a recycled presentation, so you can see the title. We gave this presentation a couple months ago, but what we're going to talk about is how you can go about correcting a lot of low-cost sensors without a colocation. Yeah. So yeah, these are just sort of the different agenda items that we'll talk about today. I think I can skip this in light of time. Yeah, so this figure shows the density of reference monitors per million people in the year 2022, and this is data from OpenAQ. And so the green is greater than 5 reference monitors per million people. The yellow is 1 to 5, and the red is less than 1. So you can see that the United States and Western Europe and Canada and Australia, have pretty good reference monitoring coverage, whereas most of the global South doesn't have that. Most of the global South is either 0 monitors or less than 1 monitor per million people. And so this is just on the OpenAQ website, so it might not include everything that's out there, at least, stuff. This is just kind of what's shared publicly. So, this is sort of a big issue, and people have also talked about low-cost sensors being a solution. But, traditional monitoring has a lot of, challenges, mostly with cost, and also kind of capacity and logistics and things like that. And so this is sort of, our group has tried to alleviate this in a number of ways. We've been deploying reference monitors all over different places in the global South. This is a photo from Togo, where we had deployed a TM 1400 reference monitor. But to do this, the cost is quite high. And then when you add in auxiliary things, like a lot of times these instruments need to be in a very fixed environment. They either need like heated inlets, or they need to be air conditioned in hot environments. Then you're adding a bunch of energy costs and electricity costs and so on and so forth. And so it becomes kind of a difficult situation that, frankly, I don't think we'll ever be able to have the density of reference monitors that we need to address a lot of the air quality challenges that we're facing. And this goes for not just the global South, but also, the wealthier countries. In the United States, even in, a country with a lot of resources, it's not going to be possible to have a reference monitor on every street corner. It's oftentimes that some of the neighborhoods that have the highest pollution levels are neglected by government agencies with their traditional reference monitoring programs. And so low-cost sensors have a role to play, I believe, in global North countries as well. So the different, consumer grade sensors do offer some better spatial coverage. And so this is just a screen grab from Purple Air. And you can see now that, each of these dots is a different site. And now if you include Purple Air, there's a little bit better of a distribution in the global South. Still, most of the monitors are in the United States, and there's a lot in Europe as well. But you can see several in South Asia, and there's more in Africa, and there's more across South America. So we do have some potential there. Yeah, and then these are just sort of various types of air sensors. I apologize, I don't have a picture of the AirGradient up on here. This is a bit of an older set of slides. And I think one of the key things you need to do if you're going to use these low-cost sensors is do some kind of correction factor. All right, and so this is an example of what we did in Ghana, where we co-located a Purple Air with a reference monitor, and we collected side-by-side data for over a year. And the raw low-cost sensor data, maybe it's hard to see here, is this purple line, and the reference data, which is at the U.S. Embassy in Accra, is the turquoise line. And you can see that there's some deviation here. You see this purple in this green square going quite above the gold standard, reference monitor. But if you apply some correction factor, using a variety of different methods, whether it's linear regression or machine learning or what we'll talk about, Gaussian mixture regression, you can get basically the pink line, which is now the Purple Air data corrected, and it's much closer to the truth, basically, the reference monitor, the U.S. Embassy data. So, how do we get this correction factor? Well, you have to co-locate with a reference monitor. And, this is sort of just a hypothetical map here, so don't really take this seriously, but there's many low-cost sensors around the world that do have reference monitor co-locations. However, there's a lot more that don't. All right, so if you look at sort of the map of Purple Airs or any AirGradient or any sensor company, there's just way more sensors than there are reference monitors, and we will never get to a point where every single sensor or even like subgroups of sensors will be able to do a co-location with the reference monitor. We'll never get there. It just is a infeasible thing to do. So that kind of gives us a challenge of, well, if we can't do that, then can we somehow extract still useful data out of these low-cost sensors? Because just using them uncorrected is not really a good idea. It can be misleading. But on the other hand, we still want to be able to leverage all of this data because it's valuable. It has much better spatial coverage, as we've seen, compared to the reference monitoring, and it has the potential to really kind of expand. There's a lot of folks, people on this call that are included, that are doing more and more sensor deployments. And so we really be missing an opportunity here if we don't try to come up with a way to co-locate and apply some correction factor without having a local co-location. So that being said, my first bullet point here, that the local co-location correction method should be preferred. Having that side-by-side data, sampling the same air in the same environment for a long period of time, I think is much preferred. But it would leave thousands of data locations untapped, as I was sort of explaining. So when such a local co-location is not feasible, maybe a broadly applicable or even universal correction factor could maximize the utility of low-cost sensor data. And so Mark John et al. From the US EPA, they've done this for a US-wide correction factor for purple airs in the US. And it works pretty well, and you can find that paper somewhere and take a look at it. But what we're trying to do is something a little bit different. So we're going to try to, expand this beyond just the US, because there's, the air quality problems are more severe in other parts of the world. And so we are going to introduce sort of this Gaussian mixture method that I'm going to talk about in the next couple slides, where we basically are able to have a model that can represent different types of pollutant mixes, different types of sources of pollution, different climates, so that it covers a wide range of potential data points that need to be corrected. Since data that is collected from a purple air in Tanzania, for example, is way different than a purple air corrected in New York. There's environments are different, the sources of pollution are different, the particle composition and size and all that is probably different as well. So we've basically tried to approach this by selecting a diverse set of local co-location sites, something like 10 or so, that span a wide range of concentrations and span a wide range of environmental conditions and sources and things like that. And then use that to sort of build a location independent correction factor. And so we can test this on data sets that the model hasn't really seen. And so I'll kind of explain that in the following slides. So this is sort of, a pictorial representation of what we're trying to do. So you may have some low-cost sensor data, that has PM concentrations. You can think of this as like a probability density or a histogram. It might have some concentrations that look like this. It's probably not perfectly, normal like that. But let's say there's kind of a data point, on the edge here in the higher end that we are wanting to correct. You know, if I can go back, actually, the Accra Ghana data set might not be, you know, exactly perfect for that, considering most of the data lies in sort of a different, you know, concentration regime than what we're seeing here. So what we're thinking is that if we add a bunch of other sites, you know, Delhi, India might have a PM 2.5 distribution that looks something like this. Maybe it's a little bit higher concentration, it's a little more polluted. And then, you know, maybe Jakarta, this is all sort of just hypothetical data, so please don't take it too seriously. But, you know, maybe Jakarta has something like this. And basically, if you kind of sum all these up, you can keep going and going. You might have a global training data set that expands a much larger range. And then, you know, that data point that we wanted to correct is then kind of like smack in the middle of what we're looking at. So yeah, so this is, I think I said 10 colocations. It's more like 20 or so colocations, local colocations that we're building this on. So we've collected colocations from all around the world, I think from all the continents even, except for Antarctica. And we've, you know, collected the data, cleaned it, and then applied this correction model called Gaussian mixture regression, which is able to identify different regimes. So it's able to say, okay, this is like high relative humidity data. This is data that fits, you know, for potential sources like open burning, things like that. This is data that's more like traditional sources of air pollution from like power plants or vehicles. It's able to sort of put those into different mixtures, basically into different components, and then you can use those components as the correction. And one of the key things about the Gaussian mixture regression is that, or Gaussian mixture models in general, is that when you assign data to certain components, it's what we would call a soft assignment. And so every data point has some mixture of likelihood that it belongs to a certain cluster or a certain component. All right, so you could say we have this data point, and you know, 75% of it, you know, belongs to the colocation data in Tanzania, and 25% of it belongs to the colocation in New York, or, you know, and so on and so forth. So basically, there's some flexibility there. So you're not just sort of applying one you know, rigid sort of correction factor to an entire data set. There's basically, you know, you can allow for mixtures, which is key here. So one thing we wanted to do before we even got to that was test correction factors between cities. And so what we did here, this is plots showing the mean absolute, the ratio of the mean absolute error between a training data set versus a testing data set. So basically, if you look at, so this is ACC up here in the upper right, this is Accra. If you build the model against data colocation in Accra and then test it against colocation in Accra, you should get a, you know, a ratio of the mean absolute errors of 1. And that's why, you know, it's sort of down the middle here for all these different sites that we have. But the question here that we want to try is, what if you take a correction factor built in, say, Pittsburgh, and apply it to you know, Accra, and there, you know, you start to see you have, you know, higher ratios of mean absolute error. You know, there's definitely some sites here where these correction factors could be considered sort of transferable, and we haven't really gotten to the reasons, you know, why does you know, I forget which, yeah, so why does like a colocation in Pittsburgh work well for Nairobi, Kenya? You know, not really getting to that at this point, just trying to see what level of like transferability there might be. And, you know, other times, you know, those, I showed some kind of good examples before, but there's other times where, you know, the ratio is unacceptable. And so like, you wouldn't want to use this correction factor that was developed in, I forget which place this is, but wherever CCU is, you wouldn't want to apply that to the data in Pittsburgh. Yeah, so we're basically gonna, try to take all the data that we have together here. So we have, I think, 8 in this presentation. There's, I think, 8 colocation sites. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And we put them all together on, a scatter plot versus their reference monitors, and it looks like this. It's fairly linear, but there's definitely like some regimes that you can see here in terms of which cities these data were collected at. And then, yeah, I mentioned the Gaussian mixture model. We've done this with a local colocation data set in Accra, Ghana, and it works very well for that. So don't have time to go into that, but the method works very well for local correction factors, and we think it could be applicable for global factors as well. And so this is really the key results slide here. So what I'm basically showing is a comparison of the global correction factor versus the local correction factor. So it's kind of telling us how good the global correction factor is, by basically ratioing it against the local correction factor. So we created a global correction factor with 7 of 8 of these locations as input, and excluding the comparison city in the global model. All right, so if we, for example, we take Columbus, Ohio here, we basically developed a global model that includes all the colocation data outside other than Columbus, Ohio. So it includes all these other cities. And then we compared the statistics from that colocation to the local colocation the correction to the local colocation correction factor in Columbus. All right, so this is the ratio of what the global model gives you for R squared versus what the local model gives you for R squared. All right, and so if it's 1, then basically the global model is performing just as well as the local model. If it's less than 1, then the local model, the global model is not performing nearly as well compared to the global model. Compared to the local model. So you can see here, there's, for some of these sites, if you take the global model and apply it to Accra, you get sort of a relatively low R squared. But for many of these other ones here, we do see some very strong R squareds. Suggesting that there is some potential here to be able to use these correction factors, these global correction factors in some of these places. Now, the plot on the bottom right is basically the same thing, except for the mean absolute error. So don't worry about these different colors. It's impossible to see what's going on there. But basically, the y-axis here is the ratio of the global correction factor's mean absolute error to the local correction factor's mean absolute error. All right, and so lower error is a better thing. So if the ratio is less than 1, then basically the global correction factor is working better. If it's greater than 1, then the local correction factor is working better, not the global. And so you can see that most of these are pretty close to 1. Again, the Accra site is kind of one where the local correction factor is vastly outperforming the global correction factor. But most of our sites are pretty similar in performance, which is promising. Yeah, so in theory, you could apply this to a lot of different low-cost sensor data. You might want to fine-tune the model a little bit and add in some more collocations or something like that. But in theory, this could be applied everywhere, and then it could really be useful for a lot of different studies that currently, rely on maybe satellite data for PM 2.5 or other types of data sets, modeling. If we could replace some of that data that is used to go into like the global burden of disease or whatever, which is all satellite based, if we could replace that with ground-based data, I think that would be a step forward. And, you know, some method like this could have potential to allow that to happen, because we might have, you know, enough low cost sensor data, and we might trust it enough to be corrected, to be able to be used for these applications. So I'll just wrap up and say, you know, we are adding sort of a little more data to our methodology here. You know, we're looking at different features as well. Instead of just using, you know, the raw PM 2.5 output and the population, or sorry, and the temperature and the relative humidity, we're looking at sort of other variables as well that we might want to include as potential features. We also have an online tool for this. So like basically you can scan this QR code, you can go in, and it's a deep notebook, and you can basically put in your uncorrected purple air. Right now it's just for purple air, your uncorrected purple air data, and get out the correction factor that is predicted from this global Gaussian mixture regression. So then you can take that and compare it to any local correction factors you have, or you know, do whatever you want with it. Yeah, so the key takeaway here is that the global Gaussian mixture regression model could be used when the local collocations are not available. And this makes data from, you know, 20 or 30,000 low-cost sensors potentially much more useful. It could potentially increase the high-quality data availability in places like Africa, or also in places in high-income countries where we have, you know, lack of data in certain parts of the country. And so this paper here that was by Garima is sort of an example of something like that. So yeah, I think I'll stop there, and hopefully there's time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Really great talk, and really cool approach to solve this problem of not having enough reference instruments. Looking at the time, I think we only have time now for one question. Laken, you're raising your hand. Go on, and then maybe we can take the next talk and have the rest of the questions afterwards, if that is okay. Laken?
Sure.
All right. Thanks. I mean, good talk, Dan. That was very good. So, I mean, one comment is because when you're showing the comparison of the results and the error, so it's you're getting large error in Accra and is in Nairobi. And you did say at the beginning that you had, 20 collocation sites that you used to kind of develop this Gaussian model. So my question then is it because those sites are weighted towards global north cities, and you don't have enough, or that's actually making it very difficult to capture the information of the African cities that are actually propagating this error? Because it seems it's working really nice within the global north, at least for the states, the cities that you've looked at in the states. So I'm guessing, so I don't know if you've looked into that.
Yeah, that's a really good observation and a good question. I would say, so the version that we presented now was only like, I think, 8 collocation sites. And you're right that probably more than half of them were in the global north. So I do think that that's probably part of why you know, it didn't work so well in Accra and in Nairobi, as you pointed out. So, you know, I guess the answer is, you know, we have sort of a plan. We do have a lot of other collocation sites in the global south, including in Africa, that we're going to add into the model as well, and hopefully get it up to like 20 collocations. Because we do have about 20 sites, but we only included like 8 of them in this sort of initial plot. So I think you know, with adding some of those sites, it should improve in those places a little bit. But even if it doesn't, you know, I think it's sort of, you know, there's going to be sort of times where this method is more applicable and where it's not. And I think it's not necessarily going to be like a one size fits all, no matter what, all the time type of solution. So, Yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question. But
Yeah, thanks.
Good,
I
good
think
point.
it makes a point that there's need for more colocation, at least in places where there isn't. So I think, yeah, you're right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Leken. Let's go on with our third, last but not least, talk from Christa Hasenkopf. She's the director of the Clean Air programs at the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago. And also really cool is that she co-founded and was the CEO of OpenAQ before that. Christa, yeah, please go on.
Great, thank you. And thank you, AirGradient, for the opportunity to speak with you all and for convening this community. It's a cool community and unique community to be able to share out with and learn from. So I'm really excited to share with you today a report we've been working on at the University of Chicago on that came out just yesterday, in fact, that makes the case for closing global air quality data gaps with local actors, and specifically is trying to present what we feel is the golden opportunity for the philanthropic community to better support this space. And before I dive into the report, I want to acknowledge the rest of the team. You'll see that this is a University of Chicago product, but we're actually all placed at various places across the world and come from the air pollution and funding gap issue from different perspectives, from the atmospheric science world to the economist world to community engagement world as well. And also a shout out to our funders in this work. Otherwise, this work would not be possible, from Open Philanthropy. So I think all of us are already well aware that air pollution has such a high burden of disease and health impact on the world's population. So I won't dwell on that, but I will say, so this report specifically will focus on PM 2.5 pollution, since it has the highest burden of disease relative to other ambient air pollution types that are measured by governments and communities across the world. So just how much does PM 2.5 reduce global human life expectancy compared to other risks? Just to level set, you'll see an estimate here that PM 2.5 relative to the WHO guideline, looking at annual average values, removes 2.3 years of life expectancy to the average human life. And you can see that's more than transport injuries, HIV/AIDS, and all other sexually transmitted infections. It's malaria and all other tropical diseases and nutritional deficiencies combined. And when you look at the funding landscape, which is what we'll do in this report, you can see that important issues like malaria, HIV, and TB get about $4 billion USD annually through a global fund. And there's surprisingly not such a fund that exists for PM 2.5. I will say, as a caveat and a hopeful sign, we saw in the past couple of weeks that there's a $1 billion fund that now exists for climate and health, and it seems like a natural space that air pollution would fit within there, and hopeful about that. But as of yet, there's not a, say, PM 2.5 or air pollution specific global fund that exists. And so you can also look at this issue from the angle that I think Dan's talk spoke well to, this profound mismatch with where air pollution is an issue and where we're devoting resources to address it. And you can see this from several different perspectives. You can see it from a data perspective, a policy perspective, or a money perspective. And so this figure looks at the data and the money perspective. So you can see the air pollution health burden here, and at the bottom, this is specifically looking at regional share of all life years lost due to PM 2.5, and you can see Asia and Africa in red or pink is quite high compared to Europe, US, and Canada. And if you look at just the dark red here is Asia and Africa, not including India and China. Meanwhile, if you look at the resource landscape, the middle panel shows this in terms of data. So this is openly available air quality data produced by governments. You can see it flips. So Asia and Africa, the percentage is quite small of countries that provide that, are able to provide that data publicly, whereas US, Canada, and Europe, the percentage is quite high. When you look at the right-hand panel, and you look at this from a funding perspective, this is the regional share of all philanthropic funding for air quality in 2021. Again, Asia and Africa, excluding India and China, is just that tiny little red piece at the bottom. And you can see that Europe, US, and Canada get the majority of those funds. And if you dive into the actual number of that little sliver you see there, that represents 1.7 million USD per year. So that's a very tiny amount. If you look at this in terms of where there's air quality data produced by governments, we were able to get this data from OpenAQ from their 2022 report. You can see in dark orange there, we show the 76 countries where there's no known, at least, government air quality monitoring that's publicly knowable here. And you can see that a large percent of those countries are on the African continent. Again, this tracks with what Dan was saying in his presentation. And to put a number to that, that's less than the funding landscape behind this is that there's less than 300,000 USD per year in outdoor air quality funding provided by philanthropies, according to Clean Air Fund, which is a very small number to me. And to put that in context, that's less than the average cost of a single family home in the US. So for that amount, you could, one house, you could double the amount of philanthropic funding for outdoor air quality that the entire continent of Africa gets, which is quite shocking. So this problem of the PM 2.5 data gaps, which I think is in part because of this lack of a funding landscape in multiple ways, not just the philanthropic, it's been frequently discussed in policy and academic circles for quite some time. If you go to any conference, this is a frequently brought up topic. It's all over the literature in multiple ways of how it affects our global understanding and local understanding of air pollution and its burden of disease on humans. And we also know from various case studies that we dive into in the report that where air pollution data gaps are filled, sometimes with even a single monitor, national level impacts can follow. We've seen this in China, in Ghana, in Pakistan. Some of you on this call are some of the folks who have driven this change. Others of you know the detailed stories. And again, we cover this in our report. But for the sake of time, I'm going to focus in on a study that was done recently, last year, by Jha and Lanauza that looked at essentially the effect of a single PM 2.5 monitor that the US Department of State has put at various embassies across the world. And it specifically looked at the ones that were put up in non-OECD countries and their impact over multiple year time span on outdoor PM 2.5 levels relative to what they estimated they would have been if the monitors were not present. It was quite a clever study. And so if you look at this figure, what you see is over time, especially around the 5 to 6 year mark, you see after installation, you see a 10 to 15 microgram per cubic meter decline in what they estimate that change would be if those monitors had not been there, which equates to roughly 1 to 1.5 years of life expectancy if those levels were sustained over time. That could be gained, which is quite remarkable for that potential of filling these data gaps in various places across the world where this data isn't available at the national level. And so we asked in the report, what would it take to close air pollution data gaps, specifically PM 2.5, for these national level impacts? And to answer that, we talked with local actors already doing this work or who are well poised to do this work across the world. And so we launched a public registry. Several of you participated in that. And then we interviewed a subset in a lot of detail about challenges and opportunities that you found and others found in doing this work and doing it in a way that could be sustained over time, which we think is important for creating that national level impact as well. So we talked with a variety of different researchers, nonprofit folks, folks at companies, informal entities. We still haven't talked to any government respondents yet. And I'll share out some of the results from that conversation, but also to say this registry is still up. This is a living registry for those interested in being part of it. I have the URL there. You'll also see it on our last slide, and I invite you to join it. And a shout out to Farah Kazi, who on our team has led this work in these interviews. So one of the questions, and the core one I'll focus on here, you can read the rest in the report, was asking how much annual funding would you need in order to charge up your work in monitoring PM 2.5 so you could do it over a sustained period of time, multi-year, and be able to connect that work to national level impact. And a lot of detailed conversation around this question, but we did want to quantify it. And the majority of respondents said 50 to 100K per year would be that bare minimum they thought that they would need to do that. And then the other thing we did, one of the other aspects of the report was creating this opportunity score, which attempted to estimate which countries have the greatest potential for national level impact through supporting a small effort to close these PM 2.5 data gaps sustainably. And the way that we did that was really thinking in 3 different buckets. So in a given country, what were the annual average PM 2.5 levels we could gain? We could estimate from satellite derived data to know if there's a lot of pollution. If there's a lot of pollution, it means it translates into more opportunity to fund groups for potential impact. So there's a large population versus a small. Also not shown here was if the PM 2.5 as an issue, as a health threat, ranked high relative to other health threats in the country. So there's the importance of the issue. And then there was also the neglectedness. So was there an ambient annual PM 2.5 standard already in place? There's a question about whether it's enforced or not, but was there one in place or not? We could find that data for across the world. If it was not there, that meant there was potentially more, it was more neglected, more of an opportunity for a small effort to have an outsized impact. Was there available open air quality data produced by the government? Several other factors. Another one that we used was how much in development agency funds were flowing through the country. Lower funding meant greater opportunity. Several countries had $0 that at least could be tracked and known. And I'll also call out, in addition to the report link you'll see on the right hand of the screen, all of the underlying input and output data for the various countries is available on GitHub. And this is our first iteration in doing this. We already have thoughts about how we would do this differently next time. We would love to hear any thoughts you might have, and you can contribute on GitHub. You can email. We're open to any way that you may want to communicate. So putting all these pieces together, what did we find? Oh, I missed a piece. So the third piece, in addition to neglectedness and importance, there's tractability. So one thing when we've talked with funders that we've heard is, okay, great, we know that a place, the issue is important, it's a neglected issue, but who do we fund? And so a piece of that was generating the registry to help answer that. It's an imperfect piece, we know, but we actually couldn't find great other public resources that exist that look at the landscape of local actors doing air pollution monitoring, let alone PM 2.5. So that factored into this as well. So putting all 3 of these pieces together, we identified 75 high and medium high opportunity score countries. You can see the majority do fall on the African continent. And we then, if you just look at the high opportunity countries, that is 45 different countries. And that represents 838 million people who are breathing air with PM 2.5 levels that are 4 times the WHO guideline. There's a total of 34, at least that we could find online, 34 government air pollution monitors. This data was courtesy OpenAQ. And for a sense of comparison, Finland has more monitors for 1/150th the population, and it's actually one of the few countries that actually meets the WHO guideline as it is. And so we asked ourselves a very simple, almost naive question. So what would it take to make substantial progress in closing air pollution data gaps for that national level impact in places that are missing PM 2.5 data? So a very, again, naive back of the envelope calculation you can do is say, all right, let's take those 75 high and medium high score countries. Let's multiply it by the 50 to 100K USD per country. If one local actor in a given country were supported, you get out 4 to 8 million USD per year. We're not positing that like this is the way one would want to actually deploy this in all 75 countries, but it's a rough sense of what it would take to have really a global impact on national level PM 2.5 data infrastructure in a variety of places. And that number is not that high for a global impact. In fact, by our rough estimate, if even one small country, we did a calculation for Guatemala that has 17 million people, if they reduce their air pollution levels even a little bit, say 10 to 15%, the avoided health costs in just Guatemala alone would more than cover the cost of this program, so this 4 to 8 million USD program per year. And so the other thing, in addition to the cost of the program or the funding that would be needed for the program, like to increase funding for air pollution data gap work in general, is how that funding is deployed. We know, and I think all of us know, in various other sectors, in addition to air pollution, you can fund a space a lot, but you may not have the impact that you intend unless you fund in a smart and strategic and effective way. And so in taking the local actor conversations we had and other ones we've had with the air quality community, as well as several of us have had different positions both on either side of the funding equation, we came up with 4 tenets for most effectively supporting this space. And I will be quick about this because I'm looking at the time, but the first tenet was to support local ownership and globally shared infrastructure. So to fund as much as possible local actors directly and have them be PIs, because they are the key for doing this long-term monitoring that's most likely to lead to national level impact. And we recognize the challenges that philanthropies would have around that. And we think that's an important thing to understand in order to figure out a solution around this. The second tenet is to fund more than monitors. I think all of us on this call know it's more than monitors that require, that have costs associated with them, whether that's staff time, electricity, consumables, or really even just the public engagement on top of the data that's necessary to have that impact. Tenet 3, to fund humbly and with a long-term view. Multi-year funding is absolutely a necessity if you're going to have sustained monitoring in a given place, or at least the hope or the intent of long-term funding, and realistic expectations and goals in terms of, having the funding space not try to set goals for PM 2.5 reduction when you're funding a data monitoring program, and sort of that mismatch, and why that might be the case we've outlined there briefly. And then tenet 4, the last one, fund flexibly. So offer unrestricted grants and allow a variety of different approaches across countries that are operating in different systems and cultures. And that I think is somewhat self-explanatory. Many local actors are working with small budgets with limited administrative capacity and are often the first of their kind. And it should be expected that there will be unexpected things. And it makes a lot of sense to make that funding unrestricted as much as possible. And so to wrap up, just back to this question, or this sample calculation, this back of the envelope calculation, it truly is the case from my experience. I can't think of many other issues where you could inject $4 to $8 million a year globally, or 100K, let's say, in a given country, and expect any chance of a national level impact. So this truly is a golden opportunity for the philanthropic community to jump on, we feel. And with that, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank especially those of you who are featured, either your thoughts or your activities in the report. A shout out to the Clean Air Fund and OpenAQ, who gave us, helped us wrangle some of their data in a meaningful way for this report, and put links there below for both the registry and the report. And shout out again to Optical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christa. That was a really cool talk. Do we have any questions to Christa? And just unmute yourself or show a hand. Maybe while we're waiting for that, I have one. So from the funder's perspective, do you have to, or how do you do that? Make sure that the funding is then in the locations actually being used for what like do you need to have like regular reporting, or do you observe the ongoing projects, or how is that? Or is it not necessary? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this in practice will come down to often a funders constraints. So like people funding the funders will set limits and constraints on these things. But in practice, I think what makes sense and looking at other groups that do funders that do nothing to do with air pollution, but also take these 50K or so USD grants and put them globally across the world. I think it's really smart to view this as a portfolio of grants, and for the amount of the individual grant, say it's 50 to 100K, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a low amount of reporting. So it's less burden on both the local actor who might receive the grants and the organization that's giving them out, and focus on the overall performance of the portfolio. I think that gets everyone a lot farther than nickel and diming a relatively small grant for a given philanthropy than to have very strict rules that kind of slow everybody down.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. I'm aware of the time, so I just wanted to say two things. So I will ask the speakers to share also the presentations, and we will hopefully be able to share them with you, because that came up in the chat a couple of times. Also, since we want to kind of promote the networking within our group, if you want to get in contact with specific people, contact us, and we will make that happen, if that's okay. Like we will ask them, and we will make it happen in an appropriate way. I know that the time is over, and I know that some people of you in Asia, it is getting late, but I don't mind if you have still more questions, to keep the room a bit open for longer and answer some more questions if there are some. So please feel free to raise your hand and say something, or just say your general comments or start a discussion. So I'll give everyone some time to do that. Of course, I want to thank all of our speakers for really great presentations, looking at air pollution issues from different angles, but all giving kind of like optimism and hope to be able to tackle air pollution challenges in the future. And I'll just have a little look into the chat if there are some questions here. If not, raise your hand.
There was one interesting one for Dan, I think is still here. And it was, I think if the model that you developed then could also be applied for indoor environments. Maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
Currently, no. Currently, we are more interested in outdoor. There's none of our co-locations are with indoor sites, so I wouldn't really trust it for indoor.
Okay.
I also remember that Paolo asked whether it's possible to use not reference sensors, but reference equivalent sensors. Like, what is your opinion on that? Which costs, I don't know, I think Paolo said something like 10K. Would you say this is reliable?
Yeah, I mean, I would say anything that has, some kind of certification, whether it's from US EPA or some European Union or other organizations, so that includes things like real-time, BAM 1020s or GRIMS or Teledynes, which technically those aren't reference, those are equivalent methods. So yeah, when I'm saying reference, I'm including all of that. So I think that's appropriate.
All right, thank you. There's another question from Dimitri.
Thank you for organizing this forum and for the great presentations. In fact, an amazing mixture. I've got another question for Dan. Did you get any simultaneous PM2.5 and PM10 colocation data? And if you got any, would you expect, did you observe that the coefficients of the Gaussian mixture are sort of similar for PM2.5 and PM10?
So we didn't do PM10 because the Plantower-based sensors that are inside Purple Airs have no ability to measure PM10. There's a lot of papers that have discussed that. So it's not physical data, their PM10 data that they report. from Plan Towers. So I mean, we could do that, but it would require a different brand of or a different type of sensor that, you know, has better ability at guessing or at estimating PM10. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. If we don't have any more questions, then I want to thank again to all the speakers and also all the participants who joined our Air Quality Forum again. We hope that we will have in early next year, so maybe February or March, we want to organize another session of this Air Quality Forum. So we will invite you again, and also if there are any speakers who or any organizations or people who would like to present at this forum, they can also contact us, and we're very happy to include you.